My name is Colleen, and this is my kitchen. I've struggled with my weight my entire life. After trying every diet in the book without any success, I came to the realization that diets don't work. I started my journey at a size 26W, weighing just over 300 pounds. In almost a year and a half, I've lost over 120 pounds, and I am a size 14. No W. What's my secret? Eating healthy and moving more. Now I'm here to show you how you can cook healthy food without compromising on taste and lose weight just like I have. Because if I can do it, you can too.
Hello and welcome back to my kitchen. Tonight I have a really delicious Sunday dinner for you. We're going to be making a butternut squash shepherd's pie. And absolutely delicious. It's crustless, so cuts back on that fat and calories that you get from a traditional pie. And we're going to be using butternut squash as the topping instead of a traditional potato, so we get a little bit more flavor and a little bit more vitamins and nutrients for our calorie count. And so it's going to start, what I like to do is I like to use shredded chicken breast instead of any kind of ground meat. And I have here half a pound, which in this case is one chicken, of boneless, skinless chicken breast. So I'm going to cover that with water, but first we're going to add a couple of things to that because we want to cook up the chicken and have it be nice and tender and shred up for our recipe. So what I'm going to add to that, first of all, are 2 cloves of garlic. And because this is just to get flavor that chicken, there's no need to mince the garlic or anything like that. Instead, I'm just going to peel it and pop it in there whole. Now, last but not least, we're going to add to that chicken a butternut squash. I have here a 2-pound butternut squash. And what I'm going to do is peel it and wedge it up and go ahead and bring it to a boil in the water with the chicken. It imparts a little bit more flavor into the butternut squash to do them both together, and I'll show you how I separate that out in the end. But first, let me show you how you peel a butternut squash. And if you've watched my videos before, then you've seen me do this before. But basically, you want to take off the bottom first because that will give you a nice flat surface. And then we're going to take off the top. So that gives us a starting point. And then I'm just going to take my knife and run it down the sides of the squash, just like that. And take off all that peel. So I'm just going to keep doing that until I have the peel completely off. Now that I have my peel off, what I want to do is go ahead and cut that right in half. And my knife always loves to go and crooked in these, so I have to kind of slice to get it even. And you can see there's just a little bit of seeds there. So what we'll do is go ahead and scoop those seeds out, just like that. Once I have that seeded, it doesn't matter how I chop this up because this is eventually just going to be mashed up, right? So I do want this in fairly even segments though, but really all I'm going to do is just kind of wedge it up to put in that pot. Like that. Now that I have my squash all chopped up here, I'm going to go ahead and cover it with water. I've covered it with water here. I'm going to add just a pinch of coarse sea salt, bring it to a boil, let it boil for about 20-25 minutes. The chicken is cooked through nice and tender so that it'll flake apart, and that also the butternut squash needs to be really, really tender so it'll mash up easily. Everything's boiled up really nicely, so now what I'm going to do is go ahead and take this chicken out. We're going to set that aside, let that cool, and then I'm going to go ahead and take the butternut squash out as well. I want to save this water because I'm going to use this a little bit later. Now, if you accidentally scoop out those cloves of garlic that we added, just go ahead and toss those away. We're not going to need those. While the chicken cools and the butternut squash cools, we're going to go ahead and start chopping up some of our vegetables that we're going to use in our filling. And that's going to start with 2 carrots here, medium-sized carrots. And so what I like to do with those is trim off the ends and then slice them lengthwise like that. And just chop them up, kind of into half moon shapes. And next up, 2 stalks of celery. I'm going to do the same thing with these. Trim the ends off and then split it up the length like that, and then just chop it into little pieces. And then I have here 1 parsnip that I've already taken the peel off. And for this, because the width is so varied, it's very wide at this end and very narrow at that end. I like to do these in 2 sections. So the narrower end, I'm going to chop just like I did the carrot, where I just took it and cut it in half lengthwise and did it that way. The thicker end, though, I'm going to actually quarter it lengthwise, just like that, and that way I get nice smaller bites. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and start heating up my pan, and I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of olive oil to that. I always like to measure oils that I'm putting in the pan, otherwise I tend to pour a little bit too much. So while that heats up, we'll prep our last vegetable to go in this pan first, and that's going to be 1 sweet onion. And I'm going to peel this up and then dice it up. Let's add just a pinch of coarse sea salt, start flavoring the dish. And we want this to cook up until the onions just start getting transparent. While that cooks, I have here ½ pound of brown mushrooms or crimini mushrooms. You want to get the brown instead of the white because they have more vitamins in them. And so for these, I'm just going to slice them up like this. And then once I have them all sliced, I'm going to add them right into that paste. And then for a little additional flavor, I love rosemary in this dish. You could also use thyme. Even tarragon would make it very interesting, but I just love rosemary. So I have 1 sprig of fresh rosemary that I'm going to add here. And so I just remove all the needles from that stem. You don't want the stem in there because it can be pretty woody. So I remove the needles and just chop it up just like this. The secret to a fine mince on your herbs, or if you were doing this with, say, a clove of garlic or something like that, is to use a chef's knife that has this curved blade on it. And what I do is I just take it, I hold down one end here, and just rock the knife back and forth, just like that, in a very quick cutting motion. And that gives me a really fine chop on the herbs. While that cooks up, let's go ahead and shred the chicken. And you've seen me do this before, but I'll give you another lesson, always happy to. What I like to do is just take 2 forks here, one to hold the chicken down with, and the other just to gently pull at the meat. You can see it just flakes away there. Very, very tender, very moist. Once I have that shredded up, I'm going to go ahead and add that to my pan. And my pan, by the way, I'm using my deep cast iron skillet here. And what I love about the cast iron skillet is that it can go from stove to oven. So that way I can cook it here, and then when I'm ready to put it into the oven, I just put it right into the oven. No need to dirty another dish. To this, I'm also going to add 1 cup of frozen peas. I like the petite peas. They're just a little bit more tender and more flavorful than the regular peas. And then, last thing, I'm going to add a clove of garlic. You can mince it in, or you can press it in, and you know me, pressing it is my preferred method. So now that I have the garlic in there and the peas and the chicken, I'm going to go ahead and let this cook until my onions have browned up just a little bit. And while that's cooking, I'm going to go ahead and mash up my butternut squash. Once our vegetable mixture cooks up there, we want to go ahead and thicken that up. So I have 2 tablespoons of cornstarch that I'm going to sprinkle over the top here. And just give that a good toss. Get the cornstarch kind of coated in there. And then I have 1 cup of that water that we cooked the chicken and the butternut squash in. And I'm going to add that to the mixture and reduce my heat down to about a medium-low. Give that a good stir. And what I want to do now is let this cook for about 5 to 10 minutes to let the mixture really thicken up. It'll get really nice and saucy. So it's like it's sitting in a little bit of a gravy. While that's cooking, we're going to mash up our butternut squash. So remember, I drained it earlier. You'll see it steaming. That's because I had to cook it just a little bit longer because it wasn't quite tender enough. So what I'm doing is just mashing it up. Mashing the butternut squash is just like mashing potatoes. I'm just using my potato masher here to squish it all up. And then what I'm going to do is take a fork and use my fork to go ahead and get it just a little bit finer. Take out any lumps. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of plain non-fat Greek yogurt. Now you could also use a light sour cream. I don't recommend the non-fat sour cream. It's not very tasty and it's very, very thin. I like the Greek yogurt because it's very thick, so it adds a really nice creamy texture, and it has protein in it, so it adds a little bit of something to the dish. So that's a 1/4 cup. And in this case, it's still a little bit thick. So what I want to do now is get just a little bit of that same water that I used to cook the chicken and the butternut squash and add it in just about a tablespoon at a time until it reaches the right consistency. You want the consistency of mashed potatoes. Once I have that all mixed up, what I want to do is go ahead and turn off my pan and pat it down to an even layer, and then I'm going to take my butternut squash here and put it right over the top. And I'm just going to smooth it out over the top. It's this nice kind of pale orange. It's just beautiful. I don't know if you can see then for a finishing touch, I have a little bit of dried thyme. I'm going to take a pinch of it and sprinkle that right over the top here. Beautiful. See if you can see that. How pretty is that? So now what I'm going to do is put that in my oven, which I've had preheating at 400 degrees. And I'm going to bake it for about 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, until that squash on the top gets a really nice golden brown in color. Our butternut squash and chicken shepherd's pie is done to perfection. Look how pretty that is there. So now all we have to do is serve it up. This recipe is going to serve 4 people. So just take about a quarter of the pie here. This is a great one-pot meal. No need to serve anything else with this. Full of vegetables and all kinds of good-for-you goodness. I'm going to go sit down and enjoy my meal. I hope you'll give this a try, and I will see you next time in my kitchen.